Hi, welcome to this week's Thrive in 5. This week we're going to talk about mailing lists. This is one of the biggest questions I get with consulting clients and people that I work with is how do I figure mailing lists out? Mailing lists have become kind of this fuzzy thing, and I wanted to give you a little bit of knowledge on them so that you have some structure in which to purchase mailing lists or decide on how to get mailing lists. Mailing lists are known to be 50% of a direct mail campaign. Mailing lists are everything. If you got the wrong list, it won't work. So how do you get the right list? Well, you got to know where they come from. So let's look at them. There are two kinds of mailing lists. The first is a compiled list. The other is a response list. So a compiled list, response list, and let me explain how these work. A compiled list is really what happens when you take when list companies go into directories, they go into white pages, they go into yellow pages, they go into web directories, they go to things like Better Business Bureau. And what they do is they go to these directories and they pull a list, they compile it. And then a lot of companies today are actually updating that list and verifying that list through phone calls. And so compiled lists are really lists pulled from a variety of sources put together into a bigger list. And you're going to find compiled lists in places like Hoover's. Hoover's comes from the Dun & Bradstreet group. You're going to find it in Sales Genie and places like Info USA. And other major groups like that are really all about compiled lists. So compiled lists are pulled from many sources, pulled together, often updated and verified. That's compiled. Response lists are a little bit different. Response lists are all about responders. They're all about buyers. So response lists come from companies that actually do something or sell something or have buyers or have respondents, and they compile lists based on that. So magazine subscribers would be a response list. You probably get this in your mailbox on a regular basis, those companies that sell training programs like Career Track and Fred Pryor. If somebody goes to those, they end up being a responder. There's lists about people who buy from large companies. So you'll often put your name into a bank and you become a client of a bank, and very soon you'll start getting mail from other banks. And so you start realizing that your data, the information about you, if you buy or you respond, becomes part of a list somewhere that is sold to other people. These lists are often purchased from list brokers. And list brokers are people that either own lists that they manage on behalf of one of these big companies that has buyers or responders, or they are actually brokered from those owners of lists. So a compiled list and response list. Now let me explain some of the slight differences between the two because they're dramatic. Obviously these are people who have bought or purchased or responded. These are people that have just been compiled from a list. But often these lists are much more inexpensive. They don't cost as much to get these lists. So there's value in the fact that there are better rates on these, and you can often buy this list on an as-needed basis, so you buy it and you can use the same person's name over and over again. And generally it's a cheaper list. A response list is often much more expensive. You actually pay a significant amount for the right to find a responder or right to find a buyer. Often with a response list, you can only send your mail once. You can only send it, it has to be approved by the list broker or the list owner. So it's not always as convenient. It's not easy to use it again. So it's really important to know the difference. Expensive, less expensive, one-time use, multiple use. But here's the secret. If you want a buyer who looks like your prospect, it's worth going over here. So don't think about cheap. If you're going to send direct mail, make sure you're getting a list that's actually purchased before. If you want to do repetitive kind of work in your community and you don't care so much because you might pre-telephone them in advance to make sure, you might use compiled list. If you're doing mass mailings, you might prefer to go compiled, but if you're doing targeted mailings, you definitely want to go response. I hope that helps really understand the difference between mailing lists. You've got the knowledge, now go do something good with it. We'll catch up next week.